from wrongdoing. So I started thinking, perhaps there are structural problems in our currencies and in our economy that enable this sort of wrongdoing to be profitable. I started looking around at other sorts of currencies, and what I found in digital currencies was that not only did they expose some problems in our own system, they also offer us with some really innovative solutions. So today, we're going to talk about how digital currencies can actually help us prevent crime. Now this might seem a little interesting because the news has been reporting almost exclusively that digital currencies are being used by criminals to commit crimes. But this is misleading because the main reason why these digital currencies are so good for criminals is that they're unregulated. In reality, the technologies themselves are very bad for criminals, and we're going to explain to you exactly why that is today. So why is this even relevant? How could this be helpful in our own system? Well, I don't think there's any people who would really argue that eventually we will have a digital currency in this country. Everything in our world is turning digital and paperless, and I see no reason to expect currency to be any different. Now, the real value of having these digital currencies in circulation today is that they're providing us with a test platform to see which technologies could be implemented into our own system. And it mitigates the risk of having to do this on a large scale in our own country where we could potentially cause large-scale economic turmoil if something were to go wrong. So let's talk about these technologies. In particular, Bitcoin. What is so valuable about this technology that could be useful in our own system? So in order to really understand the answer to this question, we have to first understand why Bitcoin had to exist the way it did. What challenges did the developers face when creating it? And it all comes down to digital information. With physical currencies, it's very difficult for me to manipulate it. But digital information can be copied, manipulated very simply. I could copy and paste a file 1,000,000 times, and it wouldn't require much energy at all. So the people who created this currency had to figure out a way to maintain the integrity of the system, even though digital information is so easy to alter. And what they created was this technology called the blockchain. And essentially what the blockchain is an active ledger of every single transaction in the history of the system. So every transaction since they first created Bitcoin has been recorded. And the other important piece of this is it's a registry of every single user of the system and what they own. And at any given time, we can look into this blockchain and see who owns what money and where that money came from. So to come on a journey with me now, we're going to imagine that the US has created its own digital currency and has used a technology like this on the back end. What sort of benefits would that provide us as a nation? And the first thing is integrity. Our currency would have much more integrity if we did something like this. You probably don't think about many of the problems with currency because it's been around for so long, and it's behaved the same way for most of its existence. But the simple fact that I can bend down, pick up a $5 bill on the side of the road and spend that is absolutely absurd. That's someone else's money, and I'm spending it. It's a bad feature of our system, and it's something this fixes. The second big thing it fixes is the ability to counterfeit. So whatever they tell you, a fake $100 bill actually has the exact same value as a real $100 bill, as long as the bank teller or whoever you're giving it to is willing to accept it. The only value our currency has is whether or not it actually looks like the currency that it's supposed to look like. So there's only the validation of the human eye. That's not good enough. And this system solves that problem. The third thing that this makes impossible, or at least very difficult, is stealing money. If there's no physical location, such as a bank vault or a cash register to take money from, it severely limits the options people have for actually taking the money. And even if you were to compel someone to move money into your account against their will, there wouldn't be much point in doing so. Because, as I explained earlier, every transaction is logged in the system. So you'd be implicating yourself in the crime just by doing it. And you would probably get away with 5-10 minutes before they find you and freeze your account or even reverse the transaction. So there's not really a benefit to stealing money in the system because you're rarely going to get to use it. The next big piece of this is monitoring. And whatever you happen to think about the NSA, Facebook, Google, all these big companies looking at our data, one thing has become very clear, and that's that we are incredibly good at pattern recognition in big data. We can look at huge amounts of data and pull out a lot of really interesting meaning from within. And why this is important is because the blockchain provides us now with a pulse of our financial system. So every single transaction happening in real time can be recorded, and we can analyze that. And that gives us a lot of power to look for criminal activity as it's happening. No government has ever had this level of information before. So myself and other researchers have already looked into using this for positive benefits. So people have written algorithms to search through the blockchain and pull out information that looks suspicious. So you can look into these things and pull out, lists of people who you think are conducting criminal activity. And there's no way to really check on it, but people are pretty sure there's a high degree of accuracy there. And especially with the resources of the government behind it, we could get this to a pretty good point. So what would this do to, say, illegal businesses? Well, if you have any sort of fancy accounting you're doing to hide what you're really up to, it's going to come out because the IRS, the FBI, the DEA, whoever is investigating you can look at your books, look at the real information that we store in the blockchain and compare them. And if you're acting as an individual or a business and you're conducting illegal activity, you're going to be found because it's going to be very hard to conceal it. The other big piece of this is that it makes money laundering virtually impossible. Money laundering is something that criminal organizations rely on quite heavily. It's basically the process of moving illegitimate money over here to a legitimate source over here and making it appear as if that money was earned legally. The problem with that is it requires there to be no traceability in the system. So it requires moving the money over there without anyone knowing where it came from. But with this new system, the path of money is being recorded. So you can look at the money over here and see, did it come in from 50,000 people as you would expect if it was normal operating revenue, or did it come from the one guy over here who we know is connected to criminal activity? So you can make money laundering virtually impossible, and that's going to severely cripple criminal organizations. And the third big piece of this is the network. So say this happens all the time, but say we catch someone on the side of the street and they have drugs. And what's going to happen is they're going to get a fine, they might get some jail time, but at the end of the day, that's where the story ends. The whole organization as a whole that got those drugs over the border and into their hand is fine. But in this system, we would know that that person got the drugs from somewhere. So we could look at their transaction history and see what suspicious transactions are likely them buying the drugs. And from there, we can track down their dealer, and we can look at that dealer's transaction history as well, see if they're conducting hundreds of similar transactions, and then get a warrant, check them out. And once we confirm that they're actually a drug dealer, we can look at the flow of money further. We can track it up to the suppliers. And whether there's 10, 100, or thousands of people involved in this, every single one of them who benefits financially from that money coming into the system illegally is going to be caught because we can see exactly who they are with this system. And that provides an enormous amount of power to law enforcement to make crime very, very impossible to get away with. And that's really going to affect crime rates on the street. So what do we need to do? I think we really need to fix the system. I hope I exposed some real structural problems today that a lot of you may not have even thought of as problems. But our currency is broken, and there are actually ways to fix it. And I think these new technologies are going to give us a lot of good economic, currency, and even social benefits. And that leads me into my final point. If I just looked at Bitcoin at face value, looked at what it's supposed to do for currency and the economy, I would have missed so much. All the social benefits wouldn't have been recognized. So I challenge all of you going forth today, when you see new technologies, don't just think about what they were meant to do. Don't just think about what they were intended to do. Think about the unintended consequences. Think about what peripheral effects those technologies would have. Because most of the time, those end up being more important and more significant than the technologies themselves. Thank you.